Let me tell you something most people will never admit. The ones who hurt you the most were never your enemies. They were the people you trusted, the ones you let close enough to know where your heart beats and where it breaks. But here's the truth: they didn't destroy you, they revealed you. And once you understand that, you'll never fear losing anyone again. Stand like the mountain. There is a certain stillness that you only notice when you stop moving long enough to feel it. The kind of stillness where the wind can pass, the rain can fall, and yet something in you remains untouched. This is not stubbornness. This is not ignoring the storms. It is the awareness that the storm is temporary, but the ground beneath you is not. A mountain does not chase clouds, nor does it fear them. In the same way, a strong woman learns to stand rooted in her own presence, so that the doubts of others and the doubts of her own mind cannot move her so easily. Many people live as if their worth must be proven every day, as if their value is measured by the noise they make or the speed at which they respond to life. But when you are always rushing, you miss the truth that is only revealed in stillness. Doubt thrives in motion. It hides in the constant need to act, to prove, to explain. Yet when you are present, truly present, doubt loses its place to grow. Like sunlight melting frost, presence dissolves uncertainty. I once met a woman who had spent years doubting herself because of what others said about her choices. Every conversation, she had seemed to leave her unsettled. She would return home and replay their words in her mind, wondering if she had done the right thing. Her dreams felt fragile. They bent under every gust of opinion. But something changed when she learned to anchor herself in the present moment. She began each day not by opening her phone, not by scanning the world for permission, but by sitting quietly with her own breath. 3 deep, deliberate breaths. That was all. It seemed small, almost insignificant. But over time, those 3 breaths became her mountain. From that stillness, she could hear the truth beneath her fears. And slowly, she began to move with more certainty, not because the world had grown kinder, but because she had grown steadier. In relationships, the practice of standing like the mountain is even more vital. Words from someone you love can pierce deeper than the wind can chill. If you are not grounded, every misunderstanding becomes an earthquake, every disagreement a landslide, a partner's moment of frustration, a friend's careless remark, or even the silence of someone you care for can shake your sense of self if it is not rooted in stillness. But when you are anchored in presence, you can listen without reacting. You can feel without collapsing. This does not mean you are cold. On the contrary, it means your warmth is not dependent on the weather around you. Eastern philosophy teaches that the mind is like a lake. When the surface is agitated, it cannot reflect clearly, but when the waters are calm, they show reality as it is. In the same way, when you are rushing to defend yourself or chasing to prove your worth, you cannot see the truth of a situation. The surface is too disturbed. Stillness lets you respond with clarity instead of reacting from fear. There is also an unspoken strength in not needing to explain yourself to everyone. People will not always understand your decisions, and that is fine. If you live seeking universal approval, you will shape yourself into whatever others expect, and in doing so, you will lose the very form that makes you unique. The mountain does not bend to fit into the horizon. It stands where it is. In relationships, this steadiness communicates something profound. It tells others, you may bring your storms, but you will not shake my ground. And those who truly care for you will find peace in that stability. They will learn that you are not swayed by every shift in mood or opinion, and this gives them the space to trust you more deeply. It is important to remember that doubt often begins as a whisper, a small question, a quiet, what if I'm not enough? You might not even notice it at first. But if you keep moving without pausing, that whisper grows louder. It gains weight through every unchecked thought. That is why the practice must be deliberate. Every morning, before the noise of the world finds you, you take a moment to anchor yourself. Breathe. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Let your mind settle, even for a short time. This is not an escape from life. It is a preparation for it. The old masters say that a tree's strength is in its roots, not in its branches. Your presence is the root. Without it, the winds of doubt will strip away everything you are building. In love, this rootedness means you can stay open without being fragile. You can listen without losing yourself. You can give without feeling empty. Consider how many arguments between partners happen, not because of what was said, but because of the state of mind in which it was heard. A sharp word lands differently in a mind that is already restless. But in a mind that has been stilled, you can hear the intent behind the words, not just the sound. You can ask, what is truly happening here? Instead of, how dare you say that to me? This is the difference between reacting to the storm and simply letting the clouds pass. There is a Shaolin teaching that during training, when your legs begin to tremble in horse stance, the strength you build is not only in your muscles. It is in your mind's decision to stay where you are, even when discomfort whispers that you should move. In life, doubt is that discomfort. It tells you this is too hard, or you don't have what it takes. Standing like the mountain is your refusal to obey that voice. Even in the deepest relationships, you cannot control how another person sees you. You cannot control the thoughts they keep or the opinions they form. If you try, you will exhaust yourself and lose the peace you need to nurture the connection. What you can control is your presence, the way you meet them in the moment, the steadiness with which you listen, the calm with which you speak. This calm is not passivity. It is the highest form of strength. It is the refuse to let fear dictate your actions. So, ask yourself, where in your life do you feel most unsteady? With whom do you lose your ground most easily? And what would happen if, instead of rushing to fix or defend, you simply stood still, like the mountain, and let the storm pass before deciding your next step? Because in that stillness, you may discover that most storms end sooner than you thought, and those that do not were never meant to move you anyway. The blade and the rope. There are moments in life where the weight you carry is not from the climb itself, but from the things you refuse to release. Doubt, fear, the opinions of others. They cling to you like a frayed rope that once felt safe, but now only holds you back. The longer you let it dangle, the more it tangles around your path. And there comes a time when strength is not about holding on, but about cutting away what weakens you. Imagine a climber on the side of a mountain, hanging by a rope that is beginning to fray. At first, they tell themselves they can fix it later. They ignore the strands breaking, the sound of the fibers giving way. But every moment they delay, the danger grows. Until finally, they must make a choice, cut the rope and move to safety, or wait until it snaps and falls beneath them. In our minds, doubt often appears as that fraying rope. It connects us to people, habits, or thoughts that once seemed necessary but no longer serve our climb. Cutting it feels dangerous. We fear that letting go will leave us exposed, alone, or without the security we once knew. But in truth, it is the refusal to let go that keeps us hanging in place, unable to reach higher ground. In relationships, emotional discipline is the blade. Without it, we hold on to harmful patterns because of attachment, habit, or fear of change. You may have experienced moments when a partner's words were not just unkind but carried the weight of intention to make you doubt yourself. Perhaps they questioned your abilities, criticized your dreams, or dismissed your feelings, if you do not have the discipline to recognize these moments for what they are, you may carry those words inside, letting them erode your confidence over time. Emotional discipline is not about becoming hard or unfeeling. It is about knowing when to let emotions pass without feeding them, and when to act with precision. A skilled martial artist does not swing wildly in every direction. They make one deliberate movement, the right one, at the right time. In the same way, a strong woman does not engage with every provocation or sink into every pool of doubt. She chooses her battles, her responses, her energy. I once spoke with a woman who stayed in a relationship long after she knew it was harming her self-worth. She told me she didn't want to give up on someone she loved. But as we talked, it became clear that what she was really afraid of was cutting the rope. She feared what life would feel like without that connection, even though it was already costing her more than it gave. Over time, she began to see that letting go was not abandonment. It was choosing survival over slow destruction. The day she finally walked away, she felt a strange mix of sadness and relief, but also a lightness she hadn't felt in years. That lightness was the absence of the weight she had been carrying. In your own life, there are ropes you must cut, not because you do not care, but because caring has been twisted into something that harms you. This can be a pattern of overthinking every small criticism, replaying old arguments, or trying to win approval from someone who has no interest in giving it. Emotional discipline teaches you to see these patterns clearly and to act with resolve. Eastern wisdom speaks often of the sword, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a tool of clarity. The sword cuts through illusion. It removes the unnecessary so that the essential can remain. In relationships, the blade is not aimed at the person, but at the knot between you. The tangled misunderstandings, the accumulated resentment, the repeated cycles that drain trust. Sometimes you can untie the knot through patience and communication. But when the knot is woven from neglect or disrespect, the blade must be used. The first step is awareness. You cannot cut what you do not see. Many people live entangled for years without realizing that the tension they feel daily is not normal. They have become accustomed to it. But when you begin to observe your own emotional patterns, you will notice where the rope is wearing thin. Perhaps it is the way you feel a wave of anxiety before seeing someone, or how certain words from them echo in your mind long after the conversation is over. These are signs that the connection is no longer healthy. Cutting the rope in this sense does not always mean ending a relationship. Sometimes it means refusing to entertain a recurring self-doubt, declining to participate in an argument that has no resolution, or creating boundaries that prevent further erosion of your peace. It can be as simple as telling yourself, "This thought does not serve me," and choosing to redirect your mind. There is a discipline in silence, too. Not every attack requires a counterattack. Sometimes the strongest response is no response at all, when you can stand in the presence of provocation and choose not to be moved by it. You are wielding the blade of emotional discipline. You are cutting the rope that ties your emotions to the whims of others. One woman shared with me how she practiced this in her marriage. Her husband had a habit of making sarcastic comments about her career in front of friends. In the past, she would defend herself passionately, which would escalate into arguments later. But one evening, instead of reacting, she looked at him, smiled gently, and turned the conversation elsewhere. Later, when they were alone, she told him calmly how the comments made her feel and that she would not engage with them in the future. It was not a loud confrontation, but it was a decisive cut, a removal of the rope that allowed those moments to control her mood. Over time, The comments stopped. Cutting the rope is also about self-respect. If you believe you must absorb every wound to prove your love, you will end up with nothing left to give. Love without self-respect is like climbing with a rope that is already breaking. The fall becomes inevitable. Emotional discipline allows you to love fully while also protecting the structure that keeps you whole. Some doubt comes from within, not from others. Old failures, memories of rejection, or comparisons to people you think are more capable than you. These inner voices can be louder than any outside criticism. The rope here is your attachment to those old narratives. The blade is your ability to challenge them. When the thought says, "You are not enough," the disciplined mind asks, "According to whom? Based on what truth?" And in that questioning, the rope begins to loosen until you can let it drop entirely. In both love and life, the discipline of cutting away what weakens you creates space for what strengthens you. You cannot climb higher while dragging unnecessary weight. You cannot protect your dreams if you are bound to things that undermine them. The blade is not cruelty, it is clarity. And clarity is what allows a strong woman to rise above the doubt that would otherwise hold her in place. Guard the gate. Every temple, no matter how sacred, has a gate. The gate is not there to keep the world out entirely, but to decide what is allowed in. Without a gatekeeper, the temple would be filled with noise, clutter, and distractions until it no longer feels like a place of peace. Your mind, your heart, and your energy are like that temple. If you leave your gates unguarded, doubt will enter easily, not just from your own thoughts, but from the voices of others, the chaos of the world, and the constant pull of distractions. In life, it is easy to underestimate the power of what you allow in. Every conversation you listen to, every image you see, every word spoken about you leaves an imprint. Some of these imprints nourish you. A kind word, a moment of encouragement, a story that inspires you. But many are like dust that slowly settles on the temple floor. You may not notice at first, but over time, it dulls the beauty inside. This is how doubt works, not as a sudden wave, but as a slow accumulation of things you never needed to carry. In relationships, guarding the gate is not about becoming closed off or suspicious. It is about knowing which voices deserve your attention and which do not. Too often, people give equal weight to every opinion they hear. If someone criticizes you, you carry their words like truth. If someone doubts you, you take their fear as your own. But not every voice is wise, and not every opinion is rooted in love. I once spoke with a woman who had a gift for painting. Her art carried deep emotion, but she often hesitated to share it. When I asked why, she said it was because of a single comment her partner made years earlier. He had told her, in a casual tone, that she was wasting her time on something that would never pay the bills. Those words had stayed inside her, shaping how she saw her work. She had left the gate open, and that seed of doubt had been allowed to take root. When she learned to guard the gate, she began to see that his words were not truth, but a reflection of his own limitations. And slowly, she reclaimed the confidence to create again. Guarding the gate means asking, does this word, this opinion, this idea strengthen me or weaken me? Does it help me move toward the life I want or pull me further from it? You do not have to let every visitor into your inner room. Some can be met at the outer gate, where you listen politely, but do not let their words enter your core. Eastern wisdom teaches that energy follows attention. Whatever you allow your attention to rest upon grows stronger in your life. If you give your energy to every small irritation, every rumor, every careless remark, your mind becomes crowded with things that do not matter. Doubt thrives in that crowded space. But if you choose carefully where your attention goes, you are feeding only what you want to grow. This is especially important in love. In a relationship, you are constantly exchanging energy with the other person through words, gestures, and even silence. If you are not guarding your gate, you may let unkindness slip in unnoticed, allowing small patterns of disrespect to settle into the foundation. Over time, this weakens trust and intimacy. But if you are aware and deliberate, you can address those moments early, preventing them from becoming habits. There is a story of a Shaolin temple where the gatekeeper was not the strongest fighter, but the most observant monk. His role was not to defeat intruders with force, but to notice who approached with sincerity and who did not. In the same way, guarding the gate of your heart is not about aggression. It is about discernment. It is knowing when to open fully, when to open slowly, and when to keep the gate closed. Guarding the gate also means being careful with the media and environments you consume. Doubt does not only enter through personal relationships, it enters through the constant stream of comparison, negativity, and fear that fills the modern world. If you are constantly absorbing stories of failure, betrayal, and hopelessness, you will unconsciously begin to expect these things in your own life. Limiting your exposure to this kind of mental pollution is an act of self-respect. In one relationship I witnessed, the woman began to notice how her partner's constant exposure to cynical friends changed the way he spoke to her. Their conversations were once filled with dreams and plans, but over time, his language became more skeptical, more dismissive. He was letting the voices of others into their shared space. She brought it to his attention, and together they made changes. Fewer nights spent with those who drained them, more time around people who believed in possibility. Their bond strengthened, not because they avoided challenges, but because they guarded the gate of their shared energy. Sometimes guarding the gate requires setting boundaries with people you love. This can feel uncomfortable, especially if they are used to having full access to your time and emotions. But love without boundaries is like a temple without walls. It will not last long against the wind. You can still care for someone deeply while choosing not to absorb their doubts or fears as your own. One woman shared how she handled this with her sister, who often called to complain about her life, speaking for hours without listening in return. These conversations left her exhausted and filled with a sense of hopelessness. She realized that this was not helping either of them, so she began to shorten the calls, focusing on being present and encouraging during a set amount of time, and then gently excusing herself. At first, her sister resisted the change, but eventually their conversations became lighter, more balanced, because the gate was no longer left open for endless negativity. Guarding the gate is not about rejecting challenge or discomfort. Sometimes difficult truths need to enter so that we can grow. But there is a difference between constructive challenge and corrosive doubt. The first is like rain that nourishes the soil, even if it feels cold at first. The second is like acid that eats away at the roots. Your task is to know the difference and to welcome only what strengthens your ground. When you guard the gate well, you begin to notice something subtle. Doubt no longer enters as easily. You recognize its footsteps before it arrives. You can see when a comment is more about the speaker's fears than your own worth. You can feel when a conversation is draining rather than enriching. And because you see it clearly, you can choose not to let it pass inside. Ask yourself now, who or what is standing at your gate? Have you let in voices that weaken your faith in yourself, your relationship, or your dreams? And if so, what would it feel like to gently but firmly close the gate and choose instead to let in only those who speak with respect, love, and belief in your journey? Water finds its path. When rain falls on a mountain, It does not argue with the rocks in its way. It does not demand that the earth change to make its journey smooth. It simply moves, flowing around, under, or through whatever stands before it. And in time, it always reaches its destination. This is the quiet wisdom of water. It is soft yet unbreakable, patient yet unstoppable. A strong woman understands this truth. She knows that doubt often grows strongest when she believes there is only one way forward. But when she learns to move like water, she discovers that there are always other paths, other possibilities, even in love, even in moments of deep uncertainty. Many relationships suffer not because of an absence of love, but because of an absence of adaptability. People fix their minds on how things should be, and when reality does not match the picture in their heads, frustration turns into doubt. If you expect your partner to speak, act, or change in one specific way, and they do not, you may begin to wonder if the relationship is broken. But water teaches us another way. When the path you planned is blocked, you do not stop. You simply find a different course. I once knew a woman whose relationship was strained because her partner rarely expressed affection verbally. She longed to hear, "I love you," often, and when those words did not come, she felt unwanted. She began to doubt whether he cared for her at all. But one day, during a quiet conversation, he explained that in his family, love was shown through actions. Fixing something before it broke, cooking a favorite meal, standing silently beside someone during hard times. At first, she struggled to accept this, but with time, she began to notice the many quiet ways he showed his care. She realized that love was still there, just in a different form than she expected. By letting go of her rigid path and flowing like water, her doubt dissolved. In life, there will be moments where you feel blocked. A disagreement leaves you and your partner at a standstill. A plan for the future falls apart. A season of distance or stress seems to drain the closeness you once felt. In these times, doubt whispers, "This is the end." But water knows that an obstacle is not the end. It is simply a shape to flow around. You can change your angle of approach, soften your expectations, or look for new ways to connect. Eastern wisdom tells us that flexibility is not weakness. It is strength in disguise. A rigid tree will break in a storm, but the bamboo bends and survives. In relationships, being too rigid in your thinking can break trust and intimacy. For example, if you believe there is only one right way to solve an argument, you may push until your partner feels cornered. But if you can bend, listen, and explore alternatives, you create space for resolution. The goal is not to abandon your values, but to be open to the different ways they can be honored. There is also a deeper truth in the way water moves. It never loses its nature. Whether it flows in a narrow stream, gathers in a still pond, or rushes as a waterfall, it is still water. In the same way, adaptability in relationships does not mean losing yourself. It means holding to your essence while adjusting your expression. A loving, respectful person can speak gently or firmly, give space or closeness, depending on what the situation calls for, without compromising who they are. I remember speaking with a woman who had been married for many years. She told me that the secret to their long-lasting connection was not that they avoided problems, but that they were willing to reinvent how they related to each other over time. When their children were young, their days were filled with teamwork and constant motion. Later, when the house grew quiet, they had to learn how to enjoy each other again without the business. She said it felt like learning to speak a new language, but they were willing to try. This willingness was their way of flowing like water, finding new paths to closeness rather than letting silence create distance. In your own life, there may be times when your partner cannot meet you in the way you hope. Perhaps they are going through a personal struggle and you cannot rely on them for the same energy or presence you once did. In these moments, water's wisdom is essential. Instead of seeing the lack as proof that love is gone, you can look for different ways to connect, perhaps through shared small rituals, patient listening, or simple acts of kindness. You may need to give more during one season, knowing that in another, the flow will return to balance. Water also teaches us that persistence matters more than speed. A rushing torrent can carve rock quickly, but a steady trickle will do the same over time. In relationships, grand gestures can be beautiful, but they cannot replace the quiet, consistent acts that sustain connection. When doubt creeps in, ask yourself not only what is missing, but also what small, steady movements you can make to nurture the bond. These do not need to be dramatic. Sometimes it is the daily sharing of a meal, the unhurried walk together, or the habit of saying goodnight that keeps the current moving. One of the most powerful qualities of water is that it can transform its form to suit the environment without losing itself. It can be a mist, a droplet, or an ocean wave. In love, there will be times you must transform the way you give and receive affection. When distance is physical, perhaps the connection becomes more about words and written expressions. When the schedule is full, perhaps you connect through intentional moments of presence rather than long hours together. Adaptation does not mean you are accepting less. It means you are finding a way to keep love alive even when conditions change. Sometimes, moving like water means stepping back instead of forward. If a conversation is becoming heated, forcing it can lead to hurt. But pausing, letting emotions settle, and returning with clarity can open the way forward. Water does not try to break the rock with force. It wears it down gently over time, or simply flows around it until the way clears. In relationships, this can mean choosing to revisit a hard topic when both people are calmer, or finding another way to communicate the same truth. There was a couple I knew who faced a long-distance season because of work. At first, the separation filled them with fear and doubt. They tried to keep in touch exactly as they had when living together. Frequent calls, constant updates. But this left them both feeling pressured. They eventually realized they needed a different rhythm. They began writing long emails every few days instead of short calls every hour. This gave them time to think, to miss each other, and to communicate more meaningfully. It was not the path they first imagined, but it was one that kept their connection strong. If you think of your own life, you can probably recall times where things did not go according to plan. Maybe the timing was wrong. Maybe the circumstances shifted. Maybe you faced a challenge you could not have predicted. In these moments, you have two choices: resist and break, or adapt and flow. Choosing the second does not mean you are giving up. It means you are trusting that there is more than one way to reach your destination. Water's path is not always straight. It twists, turns, and sometimes disappears into the earth before resurfacing again. Relationships are much the same. There will be seasons where the flow is strong and visible, and others where it moves quietly beneath the surface. In both cases, the movement is still there if you are willing to look for it. Doubt only gains power when you mistake a bend in the river for the end of it. Ask yourself, in the places where you feel blocked right now, what would water do? Would it push harder in the same direction? Or would it find another way? Would it wait for the ice to melt? Or would it slip quietly through a crack? And in your relationship, how can you adapt your way of loving so that it continues to flow, even when the landscape changes? When we speak of harmonious relationships, most people immediately think about their partner, spouse, or romantic life. But harmony in relationships begins much earlier than that. It begins within the self. The inner garden is a symbolic way of describing your emotional, mental, and spiritual state. The fertile soil where trust, compassion, respect, and love can grow. If that inner garden is untended, overrun with weeds of resentment, insecurity, or fear, it will not matter how much you desire harmony with others. Your interactions will always feel strained. And just like any real garden, tending your inner world is not a one-time effort. It requires consistent care, observation, and gentle correction. Consider two people meeting for the first time. Both may appear polite, warm, and open. Yet, beneath the surface, one of them may be carrying years of bitterness from previous relationships, while the other may have learned to approach people with curiosity and goodwill. Even if neither says a word about their past, their inner states will speak. The person with unresolved bitterness will interpret small delays, ambiguous words, or neutral expressions as personal slights. The one with a well-tended inner garden will allow space for misunderstandings, ask questions before assuming intent, and give others the benefit of the doubt. Over time, the difference in their internal landscapes will shape the outcomes of their relationships far more than external appearances or social skills. Many people think harmony is the result of finding the right person or meeting people who treat you well. That is only half the truth. The other half, the half most people ignore, is that harmony comes from cultivating a stable, grounded inner state that is not constantly reactive. If your sense of peace depends entirely on how someone else behaves, you will always be a hostage to their moods and choices. But when you take responsibility for your own inner garden, your peace becomes your own, a gift you carry into every interaction. Tending your inner garden begins with awareness. Awareness of your triggers, your old wounds, your recurring patterns. If you have always felt abandoned, you may unconsciously test the people you love to see if they will leave. If you have always felt unworthy, you may sabotage kindness because deep down you don't believe you deserve it. Harmony in relationships cannot grow in soil poisoned by suspicion and self-doubt. You must pull out the weeds of these patterns before planting new seeds. One woman I spoke with had been married for 15 years. She and her husband rarely fought, but they also rarely felt connected. She confessed that she could not remember the last time she felt safe enough to be fully herself with him. When we explored her story, we discovered that even as a child, she learned to hide her feelings to avoid conflict with her parents. This coping strategy followed her into marriage. Her inner garden was filled with the weeds of suppressed emotion and fear of disapproval. When she began tending her inner world, practicing small acts of honest self-expression, setting aside time each day for reflection, and speaking up gently when something bothered her, she noticed not only that her marriage improved, but also that her friendships deepened. The harmony she longed for was not a gift someone else could give her. It was a gift she had to grow from within. Tending the inner garden also requires guarding it. Not every influence deserves to be allowed into your inner space. Just as you wouldn't invite pests into your garden, you must be selective about the voices, environments, and energies you expose yourself to. People who constantly criticize you, media that feeds fear and anger, environments that deplete your spirit. These are like toxic chemicals in the soil. Harmony is fragile. It grows best in safe, nurturing conditions. This does not mean avoiding all challenge or discomfort. Gardens need rainstorms as much as they need sunshine. A difficult conversation, a moment of vulnerability, or an honest disagreement can strengthen relationships when approached with care. But constant hostility, manipulation, or neglect will stunt even the most promising connections. Your responsibility is to know the difference between a nourishing challenge and a destructive influence, and to act accordingly. Another essential element in tending the inner garden is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior. It is about freeing your inner space from the choking vines of bitterness. Holding on to resentment is like letting weeds grow unchecked. They take over, suffocating the beauty and peace you're trying to cultivate. When you forgive, you are not saying, "What happened was acceptable." You are saying, "I refuse to let this poison my spirit any longer." Forgiveness releases your energy so that it can be invested in building, not in reliving the pain. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. Perhaps you stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, trusted someone who betrayed you, or acted in ways you regret. If you cannot forgive yourself, you will keep replaying the same guilt, often attracting situations that confirm your self-condemnation. Self-forgiveness clears the ground so you can plant new seeds without the shadow of past mistakes hanging over them. Tending the inner garden also means learning the art of emotional regulation. Emotions are natural. They are part of what makes relationships vibrant and meaningful. But just as a garden needs boundaries to prevent overgrowth, emotions need mindful handling. If you allow anger to erupt uncontrollably, it will scorch the very connection you're trying to protect. If you bottle sadness until it turns to bitterness, it will seep into your words and tone in ways you may not notice, but others will feel. The more aware you become of your emotional climate, the more skillfully you can respond to what arises. One powerful practice is pausing before reacting. Imagine that each emotional impulse is a seed. Not every seed should be planted. Some will grow into nourishing trees, others will become invasive weeds. When someone's words or actions spark a reaction in you, take a breath. Ask yourself, if I plant this, if I speak from this place, what will grow? This pause alone can prevent countless misunderstandings and preserve the peace in your relationships. Patience is another ingredient. Gardens take time to flourish, and so do harmonious relationships. Many people want instant transformation. They expect one heartfelt conversation to erase years of mistrust, or one romantic gesture to fix months of neglect. True harmony is not a one-time bloom. It is a cycle of growth, pruning, and renewal. There will be seasons when connection feels effortless, and seasons when you must work harder to keep it alive. Your willingness to keep tending the relationship, even when it is not in full bloom, determines how long it will endure. It is also important to recognize that harmony does not mean constant agreement. In fact, relationships without differences can become stagnant. Diversity of thought, perspective, and personality is like the variety in a garden. It creates richness and resilience. The goal is not to erase all differences, but to cultivate a respectful balance where differences can coexist without hostility. This requires humility, the ability to admit you might be wrong, and curiosity, the willingness to explore another's point of view. Imagine a couple who disagrees about financial priorities. One prefers to save for the future, the other values spending on experiences now. Without harmony, this difference can lead to years of tension. With harmony, it becomes an opportunity to blend their strengths, security for tomorrow, with joy for today. The same applies to friendships, families, and workplaces. Differences can be destructive or constructive, depending on the health of the inner gardens involved. Tending the inner garden for harmonious relationships means nurturing joy. Many people approach relationships as something to fix or manage, focusing only on problems and responsibilities. But joy is the sunlight that allows love to grow. Shared laughter, small acts of kindness, spontaneous moments of connection. These are not luxuries, they are necessities. Without them, even the most carefully maintained garden will feel barren. The bell in the wind does not move of its own will. It has no power to resist the invisible currents that pass by. And yet, when the wind touches it, it sings. The melody is not forced. It emerges from the meeting of two forces, one external, one internal. In this way, the bell becomes a messenger of truth, not because it chooses to be, but because its very nature is to respond authentically to what it feels. In relationships, many people spend their lives trying to silence the bell inside themselves. They suppress their real emotions, avoid uncomfortable truths, and mask their vulnerabilities behind carefully chosen words. But the problem with silencing the bell is that the wind never stops blowing. Life will always bring moments of challenge, joy, conflict, love, and loss. When you hide your inner truth, you rob yourself of the music you were meant to create. Inner truth is not simply saying what you think. It is living in alignment with what is real inside you. This is more difficult than it sounds because most people's inner world is tangled with fears, old wounds, and beliefs they inherited without question. Just as a bell might be rusted from years of neglect, our hearts can be clouded by the dust of past betrayals, misunderstandings, or disappointments. The work of uncovering inner truth is first about removing the layers that distort the sound of our authentic self. There's a story of a woman named Elena, who for years played the role of the agreeable partner. She said yes to plans she didn't enjoy, stayed silent when something bothered her, and smiled through moments that made her uneasy. Her partner, Daniel, believed everything was fine. After all, she rarely expressed dissatisfaction, but inside, Elena's bell was silent. She had learned long ago that speaking her truth often led to rejection or conflict, so she let the wind pass without making a sound. One day, after years of unspoken resentment, she woke up feeling as if she no longer recognized herself. That morning, the wind blew harder than usual, and for the first time in years, her bell rang. She told Daniel what she truly felt: the joy, the disappointment, the unmet needs. It was not an easy conversation. There were tears, pauses, and moments where they both had to sit in silence. But that day marked the beginning of a real relationship between them, one based on who they truly were, not who they pretended to be. In love, the absence of inner truth always leads to an invisible distance. You can be physically close to someone, yet miles apart emotionally. This happens when one or both people fear that showing their authentic self will cause loss. They think, if I am truly myself, will this person still stay? But the real question is, if you are not yourself, who exactly are they staying for? The bell in the wind does not change its tone to please the listener. It rings as it is made. That is what makes it sound pure. Similarly, in a relationship, your inner truth is the clearest expression of who you are. When you compromise it to avoid discomfort, you may gain temporary peace, but you lose long-term trust, both in yourself and in your partner. One of the greatest acts of love you can give someone is to be honest, even when the truth is uncomfortable. This is not the same as being harsh or careless with your words. Inner truth is not a weapon, it is a light. It should illuminate, not burn. The purpose is not to dominate the other person, but to create a space where reality can be seen clearly by both. Think of a couple sitting in a quiet room after an argument. The air is thick with tension. One wants to speak, but fears the reaction. The other pretends nothing is wrong. This silence feels like safety, no more words, no more conflict. But it is actually erosion. The bell is still, but the wind is blowing. The longer it remains silent, the more both will feel unseen, unheard, and eventually unloved. There's a lesson here. Truth in relationships often has to be spoken while your voice is trembling. Waiting until you feel completely safe can mean waiting forever. Courage in love is the willingness to be known, not just accepted for the mask you wear. A man once described his turning point in marriage. For years, he kept quiet about how overworked and emotionally drained he felt, fearing his wife would see him as weak. One day, he admitted everything: the exhaustion, the doubts, the pressure. Instead of rejecting him, she embraced him. She told him that she had been feeling distant, not because of the hours he worked, but because she could no longer feel his heart. That moment of truth restored their intimacy, because she finally knew the real man she had married. Inner truth also requires self-awareness. Many people think they are speaking their truth when they are actually speaking their fear. Anger, defensiveness, and accusations often disguise themselves as honesty, but they are actually reactions to unexamined pain. A bell will not produce a clear sound if it is cracked. To express truth in a way that builds a relationship, you must first repair the cracks within yourself. This is why deep reflection is essential, to separate the noise of insecurity from the music of your real voice. The bell in the wind metaphor also teaches patience. Not every gust of wind deserves a sound. Sometimes inner truth means holding back until your words are shaped by clarity, not impulse. This is especially important in relationships where emotions can rise quickly. A truth spoken in the heat of anger can cause more harm than silence. The timing of your truth matters as much as its content. Yet, waiting too long can be equally damaging. Imagine standing by a bell that never rings, even though the wind is strong. Eventually, you stop expecting to hear it. In love, if you repeatedly hide your true feelings, the other person may stop trying to know you. They may assume you have nothing to share, or worse, that you no longer care. The courage to express your inner truth is also the courage to hear someone else's. This is where many relationships falter. People want honesty, but only if it confirms what they already believe. But if you truly value truth, you must be willing to hear the notes that are uncomfortable. A bell may produce a sound that startles you, but it is still its authentic song. In the journey of love, you will encounter winds that are gentle and winds that are fierce. Both will reveal something about the sound of your heart. The gentle winds may coax out your gratitude, joy, and admiration. The fierce winds may bring forth your boundaries, pain, and unmet needs. Both are part of the same truth. To be whole in a relationship, you must let your bell ring in both kinds of wind. This is where deep connection is born. Not in the moments where everything is easy, but in the moments where you are both willing to stand in the wind and let your truths meet. This meeting may not always be harmonious at first, but with patience and respect, it can create a melody richer than anything silence could offer. And so, the bell in the wind becomes a reminder. You were not made to be silent in love. You were made to respond to life with the sound of your truth. Even if your voice shakes, even if your words are imperfect, because the one who truly loves you will not just listen for your sound. They will cherish it, learn its tone, and allow their own bell to ring in response. Life will never stop testing you. The winds will always shift, and storms will come when you least expect them. But what defines you is not how calm the weather is. It's how steady you stand when the ground shakes beneath you. Every wound you have carried has shaped the depth of your compassion. Every disappointment you've endured has taught you the value of clarity. And every ending you've faced has quietly opened the door to a new beginning you could not yet see. Love, respect, and trust are not found in grand gestures, but in the small, consistent actions that align with truth. In every relationship, whether with another or with yourself, your greatest strength will come from knowing who you are when no one else is watching, and holding to that with unshakable grace. The world does not need you to be perfect. It needs you to be real, to love without losing yourself, to forgive without becoming blind, to walk away without bitterness, and to return to the center of your own heart again and again, no matter how far life's winds may carry you. One day, you will look back and realize that the things you thought were breaking you were, in fact, building you. That the people who left made space for those who were meant to stay. And that the moments when you felt most lost were the very moments you were finding the courage to truly live. Stand firm, walk forward, and never forget, you carry within you a strength the world cannot take away.